Hey guys, ANY here. Recently everybody's talking about fair use on YouTube. People are asking where it is. #WTFU. And dozens of content producers share their stories of falling victim to the abuse of the copyright system here on our beloved video sharing platform. However, while everybody's eager to join the choir of complaining and some folks offer a lot of advice how to fix the system, I also noticed a bit of confusion among many users about how and when fair use actually applies. And as a consequence, there are some content producers who claim fair use for their creations while they are completely in the wrong. And this is bad for multiple reasons. If a company pays a little bit of attention to the appeals they get and notices a false fair use claims, they could actually sue those YouTubers and win. This would probably leave the video creators in question in debt for their lifetime, and it would hurt the rest of us, because cases of false fair use claims that end up in favor of the copyright holder will provide leverage against all the other YouTubers who try to rightfully appeal against copyright claims and strikes. And even if those fair use abusers don't get caught and sued, they are constantly weakening the concept of fair use in general. Let's be honest here. History has taught us that if the abusability of a system and the common practice of such becomes known, people lose their trust in the system. Just think about how we all lost our trust in YouTube because we all witnessed how their system gets abused. So let me give you a quick guide on how to fair use. But before we can talk about fair use, we first need to understand what fair use is. Namely, an exception to the exclusive rights of a content creator of an original work for its use and distribution, also known as copyright. Now, due to the ongoing debate that recently went mainstream, especially we all here on YouTube are used to seeing copyright holders as the bad guys, and as a consequence the word copyright itself gained a bit of a bad rap. What is really a shame, considering that we all are copyright holders ourselves the moment we create content, and that the idea of copyright is actually a rather amazing one. The purpose of copyright is, quote, to promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. In other words, copyright is there to motivate creative minds to sit down and create something new. Think about it like this. Somebody has an idea either for an invention or, what is maybe more relatable to the non-scientists among us, a piece of art, like, let's say, a TV show. Now, turning this idea into reality requires time, money and labor. And while you're working on this project, you gain nothing from it in compensation for the resources you spend. So unless you are really just doing this as a non-profit hobby in your spare time, you are banking all your investment on the profit you can make later on with your creation once it is completed. Now, without copyright, the very moment you are finished, somebody else can just come in and duplicate your work. Not steal, but copy. For example, ripping a DVD of a just produced movie. Obviously, this way to own a version of the final product requires a lot less investment than the original creation of it. And when this copier starts to distribute the product alongside the original creator, not only does he cut into the profit the creator calculated on in order to make up for what he invested into his product, no, the copier is even capable of undercutting the price for the product because he has no production costs and maybe even corresponding debts himself he needs to make up for. The most extreme scenario would be that the copier even gives the product away for free, like for example uploading an entire movie or show to the internet to be watched at no charge. And without copyright, this way of completely screwing over the creator would be absolutely legal. I know, we have all watched this kind of free content one time or another, and I will not judge anybody for doing this in general. The one without sin casts the first stone and such. I just want to remind you guys, watching this stuff for free is hurting the creators of the content in question. And if everybody would do this all the time, there wouldn't be any new shows, movies, songs, drawings or inventions at all. Except maybe the ones by people who really only do this as a hobby, and we all know how those turn out.
I am Bartholomew Oswald Samson Smith, but you can call me boss.
So copyright says you create something, so for a certain period of time only you have the right to distribute it and therefore make a profit of it. And only thanks to this law we have all our favorite professional produced shows, movies and so on. However, this rule is also very strict. I mean, We are talking about, quote, exclusive rights here. How far does this go? Are you, for example, allowed to make fun of a movie by parodying it? Would this be freedom of speech because you express your opinion, or are you violating copyright law because you infringe on an existing creation? What about a critique that includes imagery from its subjects in order to emphasize the point the critic is making? What about news coverage? Enter fair use, or your local equivalent if you're not living in the USA. The idea is to allow under certain conditions the limited use of copyrighted material without permission from the rights holder. Because, let's be honest, if you could make, for example, a review of a movie only with the permission of the movie owner, who usually exclusively wants to see positive reviews, there wouldn't be a single review of Batman vs Superman. Too early. Anyways, now when is the use of copyrighted material fair and when not? While it often boils down to a case-by-case decision by a judge, there is a 4-factor balancing test courts go by, and so should you when creating something that includes copyrighted material. Factor number 1. Purpose and character of the use. This factor has 2 major aspects to take into consideration. First, is your use of a commercial nature or not? In other words, do you make money with it? While a non-commercial use doesn't automatically make it fair, example, uploading an entire movie to YouTube is still illegal even if you don't make any money with it, making a profit on the other hand can still be covered. Otherwise, Weird Al Yankovic would be a crime lord of infringement. However, a much higher weight falls upon the second aspect, the extent to which the new work is transformative to the original it borrows from. In the context of a case in the US Supreme Court, transformative gets construed as follows: altering the original with new expression, meaning or message. Example, using part of an advertisement within a collage in order to make a statement about the typicality of the ad. Hereby it is crucial that the new work does not supersede the use of the original work, a standard that has been around since the mid-1800s. But what does this mean? A perfect example would be what Grade A Under A points out in his video Everything That's Wrong with YouTube Part 1, when he talks about reaction videos that feature the full length of another video and therefore literally supersede the original work, because it has just been featured in its entirety. Factor number 2. Nature of the copyrighted work. This probably only becomes relevant in edge cases and is not very helpful for the average content producer who has to face off against copyright claims, so I'll keep it short. One aspect of this factor is the question if the material is fiction or non-fiction. If the latter is the case, this might actually work in your favor, especially when you act in the name of public interest. Best example, the news. Even though there are some news stations that mostly focus on fictional stories, but that's a can of worms I don't want to get any closer. The second aspect of this factor is the question if the work has already been published. If something you use has not been published, this might be bad for you, because you are interfering with the creator's right to control the circumstances of the publication of his work. But as long as you're not working with WikiLeaks, I assume the majority of the copyrighted material you use will have been published anyways. So in order to fail on the second factor, you actually need to go out of your way, if you ask me. Factor number 3. Amount and substantiality. The amount question can be answered rather easily. The smaller the part of copyrighted material you use, the better. For example, on YouTube this means short clips good, entire movies or episodes bad. However, there's also the second aspect, the one about substantiality, which means if even a super small portion of the original work gets used, but this portion happens to carry the core meaning of the original work, you might still be screwed. For example, there had been a court case about a quote that made up only 0.2% of a document, and the use was found not to be fair due to the substantiality of this portion. How to make sure this doesn't happen to you? Very good question. I would recommend focusing on keeping your work as transformative as possible according to factor 1. At the end of the day, I doubt that the majority of original work out there contains pieces that are so substantial that they carry the entire meaning of the work they are part of. Unless, of course, as mentioned before, your new work contains a barely altered original work as a whole. To give another example, the sculpture on the right has been crafted after the photo on the left, and the judge declared it was not protected by fair use because of the a lack of transformativeness. Or, to look at it under the lens of factor number 3, the sculpture copied the substantial artistic expression of the photo it was based on. And finally, factor number 4, effect upon work's value. Let me remind you of the original purpose of copyright I explained earlier. It is to allow a creator to earn their fair share resulting from the distribution of their work. Now, if a new creation that includes material of said original work harms the original creator's ability to profit from his creation, this goes against fair use. Important exceptions are, for example, negative critiques, because in such cases a loss of profit does not result from the fact that the review is a substitute for experiencing the original work, but rather that the original work is shit and the review warns people about it. And this is also the rule of thumb you should keep in mind here. When your creation becomes a substitute to the original, you are probably not protected by fair use. Like selling t-shirts printed with some art you took from the internet without permission from the artist, so as a consequence the artist makes less sales himself. You won't believe how often this happens, especially within fandoms. Chances are that when you fail on one of the first 3 factors, you also fail on the last one. Not transformative enough? You show too much and or too substantial parts of the original? You created a substitute. And when you distribute some unpublished work, you obviously also harm the copyright holder's possibility to control the publication and therefore when and where he earns money. Now, after all those don'ts, how can you use copyrighted material under the protection of fair use? Focus on turning it into something new and original that gives the observer a completely different experience from watching the original work. Like a review that only uses clips, maybe even out of order and often voiced over, while it adds analysis and commentary so it is as transformative as possible. Or by creating a parody that once again completely alters the tone of the original. An interesting grey area here are Let's Plays, since they often include very big portions of the featured games. However, the difference in the experience between watching somebody else play a game and playing it yourself is widely considered rather significant, covering factor number 3, unless you play Dear Esther. And the audiovisual input by the Let's Player himself provides a little bit of transformativeness as well.
Ah, panic, panic, panic. Why does nobody tell me that this level has a timer?
Not to mention that I can testify firsthand that I have bought more than one game as a direct consequence of watching a Let's Play. Finally, make sure that there is as little of the copyrighted material in your work as possible for your purpose. Sorry for bringing up yet another YouTube specific example, but hey, that's where I have the most experience myself, and you are here watching a video yourself, are you not? But the Fine Brothers proves that even something that has a very high risk of going against fair use, namely reaction videos, can be basically 100% covered by fair use. How do they do it? They don't show the entire recording of a person reacting, but rather only show the highlights, what also shifts the focus from the featured footage to the reaction to it. This makes the product super transformative and they run no risk of using a too high amount of the copyrighted material. In addition, they also have this section at the end where they interview the reactors, that usually takes up even more screen time than the reaction part. As a consequence, their videos don't substitute watching the original. They might even have the opposite effect and get people interested in the first place. Now, how to translate this extraordinary good example of fair use of copyrighted material, not an extraordinary good example of program, mind you, because my god, Fine Brothers videos are repetitive and boring as fuck. Well, how to translate this from video to other media, I am not sure. But this is something we can figure out together in the comments below, and of course by spreading this video to smarter minds than myself. This is ANY saying see you soon.